Welcome to the Myth and Magic Authors Podcast, folklore and fantasy topics aimed at creative storytellers. To write stories and challenge your brain with exciting ideas, delve into these presentations and reflections. See how fantasy realms are based on actual world history, legend, and lore. Study fairy tales, nature fables, and supernaturalism to engage in a jumble of concepts that will trigger your fancy and get you writing imaginatively. Now, here's your host, Neil Mach.
Hi, fantasy fiction fans, and welcome to Myth and Magic, another bumper edition. And today I'm really excited because I'm talking to an editor of a magazine, a Australian science fiction and fantasy magazine by the name of Etherea. So I'm chatting to the editor, Aidan, about his project, which is a new space for authors to submit speculative fiction and for readers of speculative fiction to enjoy some excellent stories that have been collected from authors, many of them new and many of them independent, from all across the world. It's a lovely space. We are big fans of Etherea magazine, and their history is that they were established in July this year, 2021. So we're going to chat with Aidan about what it's like to edit a literary magazine and also what they want to see from authors who are thinking of submitting a story, what kind of story they want inside the magazine, and also a little bit about the trials and tribulations of setting up a literary magazine and running a magazine, and what the future of literary magazines and even fantasy fiction itself will hold. So let's, without further ado, move over to Australia and speak to Aidan, the editor of Etherea magazine. Hello. Where are you speaking from? Are you Canberra?
No, I'm in Townsville, which is, do you know where Cairns is?
Yeah.
Yeah. So Cairns is the beautiful tropical city to the north where all the tourists go. We are the industrial working city, which is semi-arid, about a few hours down south from that, which no one really wants to go on holiday to. So,
but somebody's got to do all that work, haven't they? Somebody's got to keep
well, it is
Australia rolling.
It is, yeah.
Well, I'm speaking from just west of London. I'm about 7 miles away from Windsor on the River Thames.
Oh, cool.
Have you been to London?
Yeah. No, I but as a tourist, not as a. I imagine living there is.
Yeah, different.
Yeah.
But typical England, it's obviously just about to rain, so there might be a bit of thunderous rain a bit later, just to let you know. What about the weather like there?
It's very dry. It's coming into the wet season for us. So Townsville is it's quite a dry town, but it has the sort of monsoonal afternoon thunderstorms and all that kind of thing. A hell of a lot of rain in a short period of time, and then it's gone, leaving the humidity.
So, Etherea. Now, to me, being a fantasy fiction author, I tend to not only use that word, but even think about it. And it kind of suggests to me, you're talking about something which either is there or isn't there. It's half there, it's half not there, and half in and half out of our mundane world that we live in. And I think also it evokes poetic imagination. Is that how you think about the word?
Yeah, well, I think it's one of those, personally, I love the word. I think it's one of those things which has a whole lot of uses because of its ambiguity, like you say. You can be talking about it in terms of like the magazine, you can be talking about it in the like a fantasy way, but it almost could be like a science fiction-y kind of thing. It is kind of whimsical and just everything, but also it's nothing. It's not a real word, but it's great. I'm actually quite pleased with it.
I'm sure you are. I think it says it all of what you're going to tell us in a second, what your pitch is. Before we do that, let's quickly talk about you and your experience and your path into publishing a magazine. So are you a creative artist yourself or an author?
Well, not published in any form or anything like that. I think like everyone who is interested in this field, I have about 500,000 short stories written and tucked away. You know, if you open a cupboard, a whole sheaf of papers will fall down and they'll all be started and stopped and edited and all that kind of thing. But the reality is not like I've not given it out anywhere. It's all personal.
Yeah, I understand that. To me, there are performing writers. And what I mean by that is that you let that writing go and it goes out into the world, and then you're no longer in control of it. But there's obviously a huge amount, probably the majority of people are non-performing artists. They're writing for their own pleasure and for their own experience and for quest of knowledge, or just to answer questions in their own head. Is that what makes sense?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely. And I mean, it's one of those things where I do, again, the non-performing artist. I take pleasure in these worlds that I've created, which you can sometimes visit and you sometimes write about them. For example, the name Etherea, a story and a series of stories which I've repeatedly gone back to is a type of ether, which is like a floating sap from a tree, which is then used to power airships and keep them afloat. And I almost sort of linked into the name because I just liked that idea of that kind of stuff. So yeah, it is.
That's an interesting concept, because helium is a very odd thing, because to us it's a gas, but they actually mine helium, don't they, for airships? It's very, very odd. So you're right, you're onto something there, I think. Yeah. I mean, why not be able to get a bean which grows on a tree, which can somehow provide you sap, which provides the gas for later on? It does make sense to me. So have you got any science background then? Are you a scientist?
So I'm an electrical engineer.
Right.
It was one of those things. I did dabble and I did start a journalism degree.
Okay.
And I did find that very entertaining and all that kind of thing, but it was at a point in time in my life where I wasn't great at uni. Yeah. So I pulled out of that. But I'm an electrical engineer by trade. So I've got a whole lot of history at writing technical documents, and I can write a dry document that no one wants to read like nobody else. But it's
yeah. Well, that hones your craft, because then you're able to explain something very quickly, very briefly, concisely, and accurately, which is important, especially in kind of journalism.
Well, it's true. That is true. But I do find it funny how when you write, you do find these little sort of weasel words just working their way into your writing, and you look at it and you go, oh, that shouldn't be there. Oh, that shouldn't. I mean, that's why you edit. But it's very consistent how when you're writing the stream of consciousness, you have your own ticks.
Yeah, that's true. So when did you first start creating worlds in your head or in your imagination? Were you very young?
Yeah. To be honest, it was quite funny. I was always very content. Like, did quite a bit of traveling as a child, like in these long car trips. I was very content just to look out the window. And you would pass for a place and pass through an area, and almost the feel and the vibe of the area that you're going through would be what would drive your little fantasy for that day. And you I can still remember to this day, I was in this rather large valley and there was long grass everywhere, and I could just imagine, and I was also reading sharp books at the time, and I could almost imagine, like a column of redcoats coming down there and all that kind of thing. So it was, it was fun, and it was a very pleasant way to start. And you're always trying to capture those nice feelings again. And I mean, the reason that you write is you want to share it as well. So
when did you first start reading seriously science fiction and fantasy?
I was probably, I used things like comics as a gateway. I was very much, not that it's really fantasy, but, like Asterix and things like that. Yeah. And that was my gateway. But then it took off significantly with the works of like Terry Pratchett and Robert Jordan. And that was, to be honest, it became the only stuff that I was consuming for many years. Like you'd read a Terry Pratchett, and he was prolific. So it'd be every year there'd be a new Terry Pratchett. And then for a period of time there, Robert Jordan was very prolific too. And so one of his books would come out, and then you would have to go back and read the whole lot again because there's such a long block of them to catch up before the next one came out. So that was what really, really, really introduced me to science fiction and fantasy and all that.
So you're on the Myth and Magic program for authors of fantasy fiction, but we do include science fiction because in my head, and I've explained this on a very early episode, science fiction is just a sub part of fantasy. It's all about imagination and creating something which is crossing the threshold from real life into some other world. So you've created Etherea magazine. So how did that start?
Well, it was one of those things where I had mentioned it multiple times to my wife, and just the idea of starting something like this, there is a glut of literary magazines, and particularly science fiction, lots of poem ones and all that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But in Australia, there's only realistically 3, and I wanted to give more Australians an opportunity to have their works published, to have their works out there and written. And even though it's like a brand new magazine with, a readership of a handful at this point in time and 2 issues to our name, it's ridiculous, but it gives almost a validity in some way, much in the same way as when I email someone with editor in the email address.
Yeah.
They treat you like an editor, even though the reality is that anyone can do it, and you can buy this online, and this is now your name, this is your title. So no, it was to give a broader options, mainly for local authors, because I think that Australian writers have been, particularly science fiction and fantasy, have been rather undersourced in where they can show their works. And I'm really happy because, in the inaugural issue, we've and the second issue, we've had multiple Australian authors who, up till that point in time, they hadn't ever had anything published or written anywhere. So
that's good.
Yeah, no, it's and I'm enjoying it.
Well, that's important. It feels like you're doing something for, almost like you're paying back for all of those years that you spent reading, Terry Pratchett and all that. You're sort of like, this is your thank you. Is that how you see it?
Well, to be honest, yeah. I mean, just speculative fiction has given me so much joy in my life. There's so many ways in which you'll be thinking about it, you'll be reading a book, and it'll take you away. And there'll be times where, I've had it where life has been tough and life has been struggling, and you'll just lose yourself in a book.
Yeah.
And it takes you away and you enjoy it. And, that's real magic that happens.
Yeah.
So to be able to be kind of a conduit for that, to allow that and to allow people to see what other people have done and then maybe have that moment and taken out of it. Yeah, it's amazing. And it is legitimately quite a big thank you. And I'm really enjoying the opportunity that's giving me to share other people's work.
Confirm again, this is the first thing you've done as a publisher. This is the first time you've become an editor. Okay. We're ready now for you to give us the elevator pitch for Etherea magazine. Over to you.
Yeah, well, okay. So it's an Australian speculative fiction magazine. It focuses a lot on local authors and local stories, but we do source stories from all around the world. We always have an interview with a well-renowned author, but we also give the opportunity for up-and-coming authors to have a bit of a self-pitch and talk about their process, talk about their work. And then there will be, currently we've got a book review in the latest issue, but that will be increasing to being nonfiction and reporting style articles. So yeah, it's going ahead as a magazine.
Excellent. Thank you for that. Perfect. So I suppose the question, and it's an important question, and also I think comes on for that, is there a place for a literary magazine in the world? Because we've got podcasts like this, we've got a huge amount of blogs. Even on Kindle, you can publish and read very small pieces of work. You've obviously got the Wattpad and all of those kind of places where you can consume words. Do you think there's a place for a literary magazine now?
To be honest, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it's quite a saturated market. There are a lot of literary magazines. There's a lot of content for everyone to peruse of varying lengths. I think the important thing with literary magazines is that the content is curated.
Yeah.
The difficulties in being inundated with stuff and stories to read and stories to see and videos to watch is the fact that there is so much, and you really have to sort of wade through quite a bit to find the ones that you really like.
Yeah.
And so the joy of a literary magazine is someone sort of done the hard work for you and gone, hey, I like this, I think you'll like this too, and I like this and you'll like this. Which isn't to say the stuff which is being not included in the magazine isn't good. It's just not what is suiting that personal, like what the editor's personal choice is or anything like that. So, someone might read Etherea magazine and read the stories and go, I disliked every single one of these, which is fine. But they'd be on a different wavelength to me because I was like, oh, well, actually, I love these things. And I was hoping that you would too. But it's, I think it's just curating and collecting stories, much in the same way as when you buy an anthology book or anything like that.
There's a level of quality there. Otherwise, you just scrabble around trying to find stuff. I was just picturing in my mind your perfect reader, the person that you're trying to get as your reader. That person is probably moving through podcasts, through YouTube, watching Netflix, trying to pick up information. What you're doing is providing everything that actual reader needs in one product. Is that right?
Yeah, that's exactly it. Sort of, packaging everything up. And I mean, the reality is that as soon as you put out a call for submission, you are inundated with 1,000 amazing stories. So it's really a matter of those are then whittled down and honed into this one. Yeah, there's one product, which then you share and say, this is what I would recommend.
One hell of a lot of work for you. So it's a huge commitment. And you're happy to take that commitment on, are you?
Yeah, no, I am. Like I said, I'm really enjoying it. I'm reading more stories than I've ever read before. The greatest thing about it is it's exposing me to a whole group of ideas because, I wouldn't say you get caught in a rut, but you do end up, when you're a reader, sometimes you end up reading very similar books and it's very similar. I would find myself often I'd be reading adventure fantasies and that was my go-to. Whereas now it really opens your eyes. Like you've got stories which are written from the perspective of an inanimate object and it's entertaining, like it's actually entertaining. And you sort of go, oh, well, I wouldn't have considered that, this thing with an idea would be so grabbing, but there it is. So no, I'm really enjoying myself. I have to admit though, sometimes when you wake up and there's another 15 overnight and you sort of go, oof, that's a long day. Because obviously you're not making money out of this, not at this point in time. So I've still got a day job. I've got children, got a wife, and you've got to fill every cup. And
how many children have you got?
I've got 2 children, 2 boys.
How old are they?
12 and 8.
All right, so they're reading age. So are they reading fantasy and science fiction?
The eldest he's not actually that much of a reader. Right. But I was very, very impressed because I gave him a Matthew Riley book. I don't know if you know Matthew Riley.
I know.
He's and it's basically it's a hover car book about this young boy who's racing hover cars, and it's long. I think it's about 440 pages, and he devoured it, which I was stoked at. So I was kind of hoping that it's going to be a gateway book, and I keep on like, hey, well, how about you try this one, and how about you try that one, and the youngest is following a very similar path of reading comics and picture books and all that kind of thing still. So, yeah.
And your other half must be very patient with you.
She is remarkably so. She's so supportive. I think it was, the whole magazine starting was she has quite a hand in it because, as I said, I'd spoken about it so often and the conditions were right. And I think it was sort of, well, are you going to do it? Like either put up or shut up. And I'm like, oh, okay.
Sometimes we need that, don't we? We need that push, especially from somebody close to us, just to get us motivated. You have absolutely all of the good, best ideas in your mind, but you still need that actual physical push. I always feel.
It really is. Yeah, it really is. It really is.
So your inaugural issue of the magazine, that came out early summer, I think, by my reckoning.
It was
It's not
August.
your summer, but it's your winter.
Yeah,
So
it is. It is.
What were you hoping to achieve with that inaugural issue? How did that launch go for you, and what did you learn from the experience?
Well, to be honest, I think I went in with very, very low expectations, excessively low, which meant that they were more than met. I was really happy with how it all turned out. I can still remember on the first day, you've put it up, it's live, it's a product, people can buy it, and I got this ding on my phone, and someone had bought it, and I went to check, and it wasn't a family member, it wasn't a friend, it was someone else. And I mean, I don't want to spoil it, like maybe it was a friend of one of the contributors or a family member of them or whatever. I don't care. We'd made something and someone paid for it. And then it actually just rolled on, where people kept on doing it, which was really surprising, just in where I'd set the expectation, because I had thought if 5 people buy it that aren't my family members, I'll be stoked.
Yeah.
And then we made, I think, half of what we spent back. So for me, that was an incredible win, because the business plan, as it is, is by the end of the first year to hopefully be breaking even.
Okay.
But yeah, I think the one of the big learnings that I took from it was, number one, it's sort of almost a marketing thing, where you obviously get all these analytics from your website, and you get a whole lot. I've got 2,000 people visiting the page to buy it, but then not buying it.
Yeah.
And you sort of go, oh, okay, well, there was a defect in what I was selling it as. And so you've sort of got so in the second issue, we got little snippets of the stories and put them in there. And so it was more of a hook and more of this is what you can get. And the first entire page of a story as an image for people to have a look at and go, oh, okay, well, yeah, we could have a look at this and go in. And that's where it's been quite funny, because my feelings for the first issue was that it was so successful in my mind. When the second issue, which I would have been ecstatic for before, met the same kind of level, I was a bit like, oh.
Yeah. I picture people in my head going to that page and then bookmarking it and coming back to it later. You know, the visitors, there's a huge amount of visitors, hardly anybody buys. It might also be a fault with your call to action. Perhaps you need to urge them into that. I'm no marketing or publicity expert, but I guess that on that page, if there's a hint that some of those stories will disappear, so you better purchase it right now. Do you see my point? That's
a very good point. That's
like what I call a motivating call to action.
Money is hard earned by everyone, and the reality is that why should someone fork out for something which they may not enjoy, or they may not actually appreciate, or something like that. So it's a matter of, well, convincing and saying, hey, you're gonna like this. But I think moving forward from it, hopefully the idea is to build a bit of a community around it and have people returning and going, yeah, I enjoy this magazine. I want to read it again and see what's said in the next magazine, and much like any business, really.
Yeah, no, exactly. I think it's going to be important for you to build up social networks, groups around the stories, groups around the artwork, groups around writers and readers. I think this will all build up over time. It's not something that comes overnight.
Yeah. You don't start building at the roof.
Yeah, that's right. So with your reader's hat on, and I just want you to put your reader's hat on, like I've got on one today. What is your favorite type of story?
In terms of short story, or just just in general? I really like the character-driven ones, and to be honest, I think the more I'll go back to your Wheel of Times and your Discworlds. I loved the fact that you had the time to get to know all these characters over such a long arc, and in some ways, what they're doing is secondary to who they're becoming. And, you know, to be honest, my favorite storyline of all time is the Samuel Vimes, the Guards, Terry Pratchett ones, where you can see the growth in him as a character from the beginning of being an alcoholic to where he ends up. And it's those easily are what just stick with me and capture me.
I suppose it's quite difficult to have a character-driven story in a magazine because you're looking more for short stories.
It is.
So with your editor's hat on now, changing hats, because that's you as the audience, but now you as the gatekeeper. What's your favourite type of author? What's your favourite type of writer or submitter?
I think, well, particularly when doing it all for Etherea magazine and the like, it's getting into the action very quickly, grabbing you very, very fast. And it's sometimes difficult because you'll be reading all these stories and some of them are, you know, they're still 5,000 words. So it's a hefty, you know, few pages. You've got to dedicate. And when it's a great story, it's just that the first 5 paragraphs are establishing setting. It's almost like they're starting a novel into this great short story.
Yeah.
And that's one of those things where if you just almost cut those first ones and just got straight in and just, let's get on with it.
I always tell new writers to think about the opening of the first Star Wars. You know, it's that laser being fired is how you start. That's how you start a story. There's stuff you're going to have to learn because this isn't a whole galaxy we're going to be discussing, but you just need to have that.
Exactly. Very much like that. And I mean, you know, you want to get in. You want to get in, you want to read it, you want to be captured straight away. If it was a high fantasy 500-page behemoth of a book that you're invested in because you've bought it and it's heavy, then you can take your time getting into it with a nice prologue and character settings and all that. But yeah.
And I do also believe that writing something which is hooky, you know, which hooks you in, isn't easy. And with respect to my fellow writers, a lot of them need to keep practicing that. And I think the way of practicing that is to write short stories. I think that they need to, if they're not doing that, they should be doing that at the same time. If you're like me, I write 2 novel length books a year. I go into NaNoWriMo.
Yep.
I think it's very important also to carry on writing short stories. So I write at least 1 short story a month. You've got to be doing that because that teaches you this editing process, this hook, create hooks. Is that what you feel as an editor?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think short stories are fantastic for that. I think, if nothing else, short stories are the greatest training for long novels because you can experiment and you can have this whole thing encapsulated in 1,000 words to 2,000 words, and you can really see what's working very quickly and what's not. And I think it's really good for things like dialogue and getting message across, because when you're talking on a short story, you've just got to get straight to the point, and this is it, and describe it quickly and easily, but it's done. So no, I think it is a skill, but I think it's one of those things which it's a learnt skill as well. So there's hope for us all.
Yeah. So you mentioned earlier you said there were 3 Australian literary magazines. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
So
yes.
What sort of other magazines have been an influence on you? If there is any which are shining lights, examples of something that you'd like to?
Well, it would definitely be Aurealis. That is the father, the living father of Australian magazines.
Right.
Because it's been around since I think 1990. I'm a bit guilty on this. I had a subscription to them every year, but then I changed banks and I forgot to change the thing across. But no, they're an amazing magazine, and they are Yeah, they've really set up the modern Australian science fiction and fantasy magazine model. The awards ceremony is named after them, the Aurealis Awards, which is your Australian science fiction and fantasy ones. But then there's a couple of other ones. There's a quarterly magazine, Andromeda Spaceways.
Yeah.
And they're amazing. They're very good at publishing local authors and local writers. And then the other one is Antipodean SF, which is a really quirky kind of magazine. They do ebooks, but also they do like a weekly podcast, which is really fun, where they read it out, and they're actually quite a fun. I'd recommend going and having a listen to those.
Yeah. But
then there's also these sort of like semi-quasi things like Dead Set Press. They're not a magazine, but they bring out regular anthologies.
Right.
So there's a few things, but I do think that there is room for more, because there's only so many spots that get filled by Australian authors in those. And guilty as charged. Same with Etherea. I would love for them all to be local authors, but it's just not how it's worked out.
Okay, why is that?
I think I need the number one. I need the publicity first and foremost. That needs to. People just aren't aware of this option. And the other one is that, because I do like for there to be a whole lot of variety in your magazine, and it is one of those things where you're being sent an exemplary story from a guy in Germany. And it is something, it's very hard not to include that kind of thing. So yeah, it's almost, and this is the uncomfortable thing, because it's almost that business hat on, where you go, okay, well, this is a fantastic story.
Yeah.
And you've got to kind of juggle what you want and what you need and all that kind of thing. But no, I think we're doing it quite well, and the name is getting out there. So we are getting more and more Australian authors who are sending in their stories. So no, I'm very enthusiastic for the future.
And where are most of your readers based?
It's either Australia or the US.
Yeah.
It's Australia, US, then the UK, and then Canada.
Okay.
The US seems to depend on the day. It's quite remarkable how just for some unknown reason you get so many people just pouring in. So you sort of go, oh, I wonder what triggered that.
Yeah.
But it's largely Australia and the USA, which is unsurprising, because they are the largest consumer of content, in the Western world, in the English-speaking world.
Yeah, exactly. So how does a reader consume Etherea magazine? What are your various different options?
Well, right now, Etherea magazine is available as a PDF and as an EPUB. There was going to be a Mobi kind of version of it, but I've heard that that's being phased out. So
it's gone.
Well, there we go.
There we are.
Well, it was, and also it is available on Amazon. So there are a couple of avenues and ways in which to read it, but right now it is purely digital. The PDF looks nicer than the e-reader, but the e-reader is more convenient than the PDF. So.
And is there any plans for that to be a hard copy that you could possibly have in the newsstand?
There is.
Good.
That is on the far horizon at the moment.
On the horizon.
But it is on the horizon. That would require, because obviously that is quite a large financial outlay. So it would be something where I was wanting to show that we have a product and can consistently turn out some quality magazines.
Yeah.
And then basically go to the distributors and basically show, hey, we've got this, we've got an established reader base. What can we do with this? How can we print and get this distributed, etc. There will be every 6 months an anthology of all the stories, which have been the preceding 6 months, and that will be coming out in digital and paperback.
That's a good idea. That is very good.
There is something real about a piece of paper. There's something real about an actual magazine that is so much more enticing to own than a digital version of it, which can be frittered away and lost. A physical thing really drags someone in. So it's definitely, it's on the horizon.
Yeah.
It will be happening, but as to when, that remains to be seen.
So say, for example, I felt like I wanted to subscribe right now. How many magazines would I be getting per year?
You'd be getting 12. You'd be getting 12 magazines every year.
Yeah.
So a subscription, well, they come out monthly, and we do have a Patreon, which will be basically that you get the magazines every month, and then you'll also be getting the anthologies every 6 months.
That's good.
As part of the upper level tier. But that's basically 12 issues.
12 issues. And could you just tell us what the Patreon is so that everybody knows?
So it's patreon.com/Etherea magazine. So Etherea magazine.
That's all one word, Etherea magazine. All one
yes. Yep.
So right behind you, I can see 2 posters from the magazine. And one thing that really impressed me when I was looking through this most recent issue is the artwork. It's absolutely wonderful.
Oh, thank you.
Really, really impressive. And to me, artwork is so hugely important. I mean, I was a great fan of Harry Harrison. Always the picture on the front. He was a magazine writer as well as a story writer and novel writer. But always the picture on the front captured the essence of the book. Is that how you see the artwork?
Oh, absolutely. It's one of those things. So I'm really glad that you liked the artwork. Unfortunately, it's not commissioned artwork at this point in time. All of the funds are basically going into paying writers for their stories and those sorts of items. So it's all stock photos, but it really can be quite difficult when you read the story and then you try and find the correct type of image to capture it. No, and it's actually really fun. It is really fun to just go, oh no, this doesn't quite look like how I imagine a person who is rebelling against the AI on a spaceship, how that captures that feel. I'm glad you like them because we're going for a certain style.
I mean, that's a merchandising possibility there, by the way. So if somebody goes onto your site, which we'll discuss in a second, they can obviously subscribe to the magazine, but could they also buy something else? Could they buy a poster? That would be great. Could they buy a t-shirt or a sweatshirt which says, I support creative fantasy fiction?
That is again, that's on the card. So it's funny. It's one of those things where I felt like when it came to setting up the website and setting up the magazine and all that kind of thing, I talked about it forever. I'd mentioned it a million times, and when I daydream quite hard. So I'll be looking up and I'll be researching how to edit, and you'll be like looking into every single different little facet of running a magazine. And then when it came, it felt like it just came in such a rush.
Yeah.
As in, you went, yep, here is now a website, and we've bought a business number, bought a website, putting it all together, putting out the call to say, hey, please send us your stories, and they come pouring in ever so quickly. And you suddenly realize that, well, maybe we put the cart in front of the horse. But at the same time, I think that's the joy of small ventures like this as you work out and you find your feet, is that you go, okay, well, this is an opportunity that we didn't think of, but it's something that we are going to go on to. There will be merchandise, there will be posters available.
I saw that you had this indie author spotlights, which obviously immediately rang a bell in my head because I was thinking, well, that sounds good. Is that going to be a regular feature? Could you just tell us about that indie author spotlights?
So what that is, that's just basically we've gotten in contact with some authors who have either self-published or small press published, and just speak to them about the process and what they've been finding and how they found it, because I think a lot of our readers are writers. I think sometimes the hardest thing for breakthroughs is just the lack of knowledge and the fear of the unknown. And so if you go, okay, well, look, this person has done it. This is what they found. This is what worked for them. This is what fell in a heap catastrophically. It's good to share the knowledge around. And I think also it's more than that. It's for people, because even though Etherea is by no means a big magazine. It is still a platform now that has been created, and it's almost a bit of your social duty to work with the community that you're wanting to be in.
Yeah.
And giving the opportunity for your community who you're saying, hey, let us involve us, to then pay back and say, okay, well, you tell us about yourself. And I mean, odds are unlikely that it will have an effect at this current point in time, but you never know. I'm building up a bit of a mailing list of reviewers and irritating them by just sending copies. And I've asked permission, but you never know if one of those people or one of the others who buys it and sees this latest novel from an independent author and goes, well, actually, this is great stuff. I'm really interested. I'm interested in what this person has to say, and let's take this further. And that would be a perfect outcome from those spotlights. That would be something which would be fantastic. But I mean, less than that, it's just sharing the knowledge around.
Thank you for that. It's very laudable intent there. Very laudable. So there's obviously hundreds of listeners, and they're going, "Well, I'd like to submit a story. This sounds great. This is exactly where I want to submit my story." Have you got a list in your mind, or perhaps even written down, of must-haves? What must you have in order to be successfully accepted by Etherea?
Well, it's quite a fun thing now with our stories, because we are collecting. Well, it can be called eclectic, I feel, what we are publishing. I think because we're so new, we're still trying to find our voice, but in its own way, I feel like a collection of varying stories is our voice, and it is what I would like. Latest issue ended with quite a dark, grim story, but in the same one, there's all these light, where a guy is arguing with his own ship's AI about cleaning, and it's very light and fun, but also, so I think the reality is, the stories could be anything, and it can be from any point of view, it can be from any style, but it's just got to grab you. Like, that is the biggest one. And if I'm still thinking about it later, that story has me sold. For example, in the first issue, there was a story, Inheritance, which was talking about the implanting of memories into children and stuff like that. And it's remarkable that I read it and I passed it to my wife and I said, you have to read this. This is a great story. And the fact is that she said to me that about 4 or 5 days later, she's turned around and just been like, wow, how would that work out? And it's things like that. If your story can capture us, that's what we want. But I'm afraid there's no square which you can say, okay, this is a square that they want, and this is a square that I've written my story to. Let's slot it in. It's more of the feel of the thing. Yeah.
Brilliantly explained. Thank you. So how can a writer get involved? How would you like them to become involved?
We'd love for everyone who hears of us to buy the magazine. That would be incredible, but it's unrealistic and unnecessary. I think to be involved, it would be just have a look at the site, have a look at the stories on it. You can follow us on Twitter. I'm fairly active, but not necessarily entertaining on Twitter, and that's Etherea Magazine, same as all of them. If you're willing to submit, we've got a submissions page which is on our website and is fairly clearly laid out. But if you're not wanting to go to the page and just risk it, my email is editor@ethereamagazine.com, and just fling me something without reading the submission notes, and you never know. I mean, I maybe.
Would be nice if people did read the submission criteria, though, wouldn't it?
I mean, it would be great. It would be great. It's sometimes funny how you can get something which is so completely opposite from what you're asking for. And, I got about a 200-page novel, and you just sort of go, well, this is not not quite what we're looking for.
Thanks anyway.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not sorry, I didn't read it, but Yeah.
And Facebook, have you got a Facebook page?
I've got a Facebook page. To be honest, I should be more active on it. I'll say that I'll interact with people on Twitter and I'll post stuff on Facebook, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I'm not an avid social media user, and it sort of feels unnatural for me to be on Twitter.
Yeah.
But I think, getting the hang of it. But yeah, I'll definitely say follow us on Facebook to keep up to date with things, and follow us on Twitter to interact with us.
So we're more or less coming to the end now. There's a couple of things I just wanted to add. One is that how can people help you? Do you want any commercial advertisers to contact you? Have you thought about that, commercial advertising? And also, how can other creatives perhaps help you? Would you be interested in creative artist, or non-writing, but somebody else who might be able to help? Is there anywhere that they should go if they can help?
Well, so we are, the plan is to start bringing some sort of commercial advertising at some point in time. And in that regard, we had the advertising on the page, but that was your Google ads.
Right, yeah.
And I found that was more of a distraction and detracting than anything else, which I would love. And that, again, would be something which I think I'm going to build the reputation of the magazine first before I approach anyone who, let's say would want to sponsor something for some reason. And yeah, it was sort of establishing from the ground up. In terms of people helping, I think at some point in time, it's going to have to be a point where I reach out for people who might want to be readers and things like that, because there's quite a curve on the amount of submissions that we're getting as people are seeing, like, oh, okay, they're actually legit, and they pay and they publish, and it doesn't look like a steaming pile. So, that is on the future. But right now, to be honest, I think it will stay as almost a one-man band for the next 2 or 3 months. At some point, we will be reaching out to try and get artist commissions. That is on the cards, and there will be, certainly art will be involved quite heavily with it, because I think that is one of the great things about fantasy and science fiction, is that it's such a combination of the written word and what you can see. Like, it's amazing, like you were saying with the covers, how it can set the scene for you. And it's so complementary. So yeah, no, it'd be really good. It would be really good to get some artists involved. And again, because you got to go out and do it with the right intentions.
Yeah.
So that would be paid. That would be paying people for their commissions. So yeah, as soon as the budget is good enough, and the treasurer, who would be my wife, signs off on it. So.
Well, I really admire what you've done here, and I really, really wish you every success, and I'm sure everybody else does. Would you just tell us again the first place that people should go to get involved? Where should they go?
Well, the first place to check out would definitely be the website, and that's ethereamagazine.com. There you get some fairly pithy blog posts from me. There are some examples of the stories, some full stories, and there's quite a bit to actually look around. The secondary place I'd say would be Twitter and Facebook, and yeah, that would be where to look us up.
Thank you, Aidan. Thank you very, very much for chatting to us today. It would be great, I suppose, if we could talk to you in a year's time and see how you're getting on. Would you be interested in that?
Oh, absolutely. Well, look, I'm very appreciative that you asked me on your show. I've had a great time, and congratulations on over 100 episodes now.
100 now, yeah.
And that's a hell of an achievement.
Brilliant. Thank you. I'll see you soon. Thank you again.
Thank you very much.
Next week, please join me when I'll be chatting with Claire Buss, who's a multi-genre author and poet who lives in London, on the other side of London from me, actually. She lives in the east, over in the east. She's a prize-winning author, and she has brought out a collection of hopeful and dystopian books called the Gaia Collection. She's also got a series of books of humorous fantasy known as the Rosshaven stories. She also writes little books of verse, and she's submitted to various different anthologies. She started writing in 2014 when she got involved in the Pen to Print Book Challenge in Barking and Dagenham, and she managed to get to the final, and she came second place with her book. So tune in next week for my interview with Claire Buss.